Like seeing yourself for the first time in full Snow White drag.
I love that description. It's perfect. Oh my God. Well, when you get to wear Sandy Powell, first of all, insane. And then you get to be lit by Mandy Walker and Nadia Stacey designed your hair and makeup. It's like the most incredible.
Hi, welcome to Ava's World. Has Disney finally taken its obsession with remaking classics too far? Or is the public simply resistant to any form of change? The debate swirling around the upcoming Snow White remake has reached a fever pitch. Rachel Z's casting, her candid interviews, and the studio's sweeping story changes have ignited a massive outcry. Adding to the uproar, South Park has stormed in with a satirical take that pokes fun at what some call Disney's woke agenda. What started as a simple fairy tale update has turned into one of the most heated culture war flashpoints of the year. And it's not just Snow White. This saga represents a bigger question. Is Disney losing its timeless appeal in an effort to stay relevant? The Walt Disney Company is no stranger to controversy, but these past few years have been especially turbulent. From modernizing timeless stories to endless social media battles over everything from casting to costuming, it seems the House of Mouse can't catch a break. While Disney has always prided itself on reinvention, many viewers argue there's a difference between tasteful updating and what they see as forced political correctness. Rather than uniting audiences around heartwarming tales and imaginative worlds, Disney finds itself juggling complaints about pandering and tokenism. Critics claim these reimaginings strive to tick boxes, but often neglect deeper storytelling values. The result? A fraying relationship with longtime fans who no longer feel the same magic that once defined Disney's world. Yet, no single controversy compares to the storm that's been brewing around the Snow White remake.
Is not designed right now to necessarily develop great leaders or to encourage more people to seek public office. It just is far more difficult. Now, I've never been in it, but from what I observe, it's far more difficult to run for office today than ever before.
As soon as word got out about the extent of the changes, fans began voicing their frustrations on social media. And with each new reveal, from casting decisions to offhand remarks by the film star, the backlash only swelled. Now, observers note that Disney might be in meltdown mode, scrambling to repair its public image and maintain its top spot in family entertainment. From the moment the studio announced a new Snow White, curiosity and skepticism bubbled in equal measure. After all, the 1937 classic wasn't just any film, it was Disney's first feature-length animation and remains an icon of cinematic history. The story is simple, timeless, and beloved. A princess exiled by her evil stepmother, rescued by 7 dwarfs, only to be awakened from a cursed sleep by true love's kiss. But the new version seemingly discards many of those elements. According to leaked details, the prince's role might be removed or drastically minimized. The dwarfs, once comedic and loyal sidekicks, appear to have been replaced by an odd group of magical creatures. Meanwhile, the original romance that anchored the fairy tale is sidelined in favor of what the producers describe as a more modern approach. This shift away from tradition has left devoted fans bewildered. Why call it Snow White at all if the heart of the story is missing? Disney's defenders argue that the public should wait for the final product before passing judgment. They insist that the reimagining will bring a fresh perspective to an old narrative, breathing new life into a time-worn tale. But for many fans, the little they've seen and heard suggests the opposite.
The one where he was in the boxing ring.
Boxing ring, and Howard Cosell, who was then a famous announcer for ABC Sports, introduced him. And I was asked at some point to get Mr. Sinatra Listerine. We're at Madison Square Garden. It's not like there's a Listerine store in Madison Square Garden. So I dutifully ran out, found a drugstore of some sort. This is before CVS. This is 45 years ago.
They fear the film has strayed so far from its source that it might as well be an entirely different story. And that's a sticking point for those who cherish nostalgia and continuity. When the casting announcement first went public, revealing Rachel Z as the next Snow White, a wave of debate began rolling across the internet. Snow White is known for her fair skin, lips red as roses, and hair black as ebony. Her name literally evokes an image of someone with a complexion as pale as fresh snowfall. Casting a Latina actress in this role raised immediate questions. Was Disney ignoring the character's signature appearance? Or were they deliberately trying to challenge long-standing conventions? Supporters of the decision heralded it as progress, applauding the studio for giving opportunities to actresses from underrepresented backgrounds. They argued that any performer should be allowed to embody a role, regardless of the character's traditional portrayal. Critics, on the other hand, viewed it as yet another example of Disney tinkering with iconic characters to appear socially conscious. They claim the move is less about genuine representation and more about making a statement. It's impossible to ignore parallels to earlier Disney casting controversies, most notably The Little Mermaid's Ariel, played by Halle Bailey, a black actress. That casting choice also sparked debate, with some praising the inclusive approach while others insisted it clashed with the original story. Now, Snow White follows a similar path, and the conversation has reignited. But the conversation around Rachel Z has ballooned even more intensely, given the additional changes to the Snow White storyline that many fans find unrecognizable. Rachel Z herself has not stayed silent.
I did. It was so fun. Oh my god, as a huge Disney fan, it was so exciting to finally get to go to D23. I live on the East Coast, so I was never able to go, and also tickets sell out like in a flash. So it was so exciting to go, and my mom was super jealous because my mom is the reason I'm a Disney fan.
In multiple interviews, she's openly criticized the original Snow White as outdated, anti-feminist, and in need of a total overhaul. She's come off as dismissive of the classic romance, suggesting the entire Prince arc should be thrown out. For many, those remarks felt like a slap in the face to a fairy tale they grew up loving. If you land a role as iconic as Snow White, fans argue, shouldn't you respect the story's legacy, even if you're modernizing it? This stance has only deepened the backlash. Critics accuse her of being ungrateful for the opportunity while lacking respect for the foundation that made the character beloved in the first place. Casual fans, diehards, and even some Disney loyalists say they feel alienated by her tone. The more she speaks, the more she seemingly fuels the flames of controversy. Meanwhile, Disney appears unwilling or unable to rein her in, possibly fearing that cracking down on its star would look like silencing an empowered female voice. Adding to the tension, snippets of interviews where Rachel Z pokes fun at or trivializes the prince's role have gone viral. Short clips circulate on social media, intensifying negative sentiment. Some watchers suggest she's just being forthright, reflecting modern attitudes about romance in fairy tales. Others say she comes across as disrespectful or smug, as if looking down on the story she was hired to bring to life. The end result? The Snow White debate has drifted far from idle chatter about a remake to become a referendum on whether Disney's rewriting is going off the rails.
She's my best friend, and she's the one who sent me the casting notice and said, "Thank me when you're famous." It's the craziest thing ever that it came true in that weird way, and that's why I bring her everywhere, and she's the best ever. But yeah, I put myself on tape. It's the worst tape you've ever seen in your life. I have no idea how I got the part still. And it's being used to teach future casting directors at NYU.
While each Disney remake tends to come with some baggage, this Snow White project seems to have tapped into an especially raw nerve. Online communities abound with passionate takes on all sides, making the conversation nearly impossible to avoid. For some, Disney's so-called woke approach is seen as a necessary evolution, ensuring that these beloved stories reflect the diversity of the real world. Others argue Disney is simply using token gestures, like race-swapped casting, to generate headlines rather than craft genuinely inclusive narratives. They point to the removal of the dwarfs, who were central to the original story, and the sidelining of the prince, as shallow attempts to appear progressive. In their view, these changes strip away the magic and heart that made Snow White an enduring classic for nearly a century. Social media has acted as an accelerant for these divisions. Hashtags calling for boycotts pop up alongside equally forceful calls to support the film. Videos analyzing every leaked detail or actress comment rack up millions of views, pushing the discourse to even greater extremes. Disney, once almost universally adored, finds itself in a precarious position, stuck in the crossfire of cultural debates that overshadow its whimsical, family-friendly reputation. Then came the South Park episode that satirized not just the Snow White controversy, but Disney's entire approach to reimagining old stories. It featured jokes about race swapping, gender bending, and the potential absurdity of rewriting fairy tales to hit checkboxes. The show painted these moves as superficial efforts to placate critics rather than meaningful ways to diversify storytelling. For Disney, this was more than just a poke in the ribs. South Park has a knack for exposing real frustrations among audiences, and the series rarely pulls any punches. Observers say that when you're the subject of a pointed South Park spoof, it signals a mainstream acknowledgement of widespread discontent. Rumors soon followed that Disney executives were feeling the heat. Allegedly, they've tried to broker behind-the-scenes deals to prevent future episodes from leaning too hard on their brand. Yet the very fact that Disney would react so strongly only amplifies the idea that something deeper is at play. After all, it's not the first time the studio has been teased or parroted. But perhaps the company realizes that public patience is wearing thin. Audiences can accept creative license, but repeated radical overhauls and perceived disrespect toward cherished classics is a different story.
That would be my preference as well.
Why your preference?
Well, look, I'm going to be 72 years old tomorrow. I've put in almost 50 years. There are other things in life that I'd like to do. I also am confident that the board will be able to identify an able successor.
South Park knows how to highlight the hilarity of cultural tensions, and Disney's rewriting spree offered them a perfect comedic goldmine. In the wake of the South Park spoof, chatter around Hollywood suggests Disney may be in damage control mode. Bob Iger, who returned as CEO after stepping away, is rumored to be hosting emergency meetings to figure out how to defuse the negativity swirling around the Snow White remake. The board is reportedly divided between those who advocate doubling down on modern reboots and those who believe the studio should tread more carefully when tampering with iconic stories. Corporate leaks claim that some Disney insiders worry the ongoing backlash could harm the entire brand. Theme parks, streaming services, and merchandise rely on public goodwill toward Disney's characters. If enough fans become disillusioned, it could spell disaster for one of the most recognized entertainment companies on the planet. That's why, rumor has it, there's a push to salvage the film's narrative, possibly restoring some elements that were previously cut. So far, the official statements from Disney remain optimistic, insisting that the new Snow White will delight audiences. But behind closed doors, insiders warn that the studio is fully aware of the intense scrutiny. Every new detail that leaks online triggers waves of opinions, many of them negative. With the stakes so high, the question is whether Disney can pivot in time, or whether they've ventured too far down this revisionist path to turn back. This entire episode brings up big questions about how Disney will approach future remakes and original projects.
And my advice to them was to not hear the noise as much, to continue doing the job that we've entrusted them to do.
Right.
Which is to tell the truth, to state the facts, to present the news in an accurate and a fair and in a timely basis.
Historically, the company drew strength from retelling fairy tales with universal themes: love, friendship, courage, while preserving the soul of each story. Yet in the push to remain culturally relevant, the studio now finds itself accused of disrespecting the traditions that catapulted it to prominence in the first place. Critics say the situation with Snow White reveals the pitfalls of trying to cater to everyone and ending up alienating nearly everyone. Instead of pleasing progressive viewers who want to see more diversity, Disney manages to irritate them with what some feel is surface-level representation. Meanwhile, they enrage conservative fans who perceive beloved characters being hollowed out. The fiasco underscores the challenge. Can Disney champion inclusivity while still respecting classic lore? Looking ahead, insiders believe the results of Snow White's box office and critical reception will shape Disney's entire strategy. If the film does well, it may embolden the studio to lean harder into revisionist reboots. If it flops, executives might finally realize that genuine creativity, rather than quick, woke updates, wins hearts. Either way, the conversation around Snow White has sparked broader reflection on Disney's legacy, the power of nostalgia, and the consequences of rewriting what audiences hold dear. From Rachel Z's unfiltered takes on a timeless fairy tale to South Park's merciless parody, the upcoming Snow White project has turned into a massive cultural flashpoint. What started out as a routine Disney remake has transformed into a multi-layered debate about creative liberty, faithfulness to the source, and the studio's responsibility to audiences who cherish these classics.
The rice has to be body temperature, and if it takes too long to serve it, it's no longer body temperature. But what was interesting to me about him was he had 3 Michelin stars, and he was still trying to learn how to get better, how to be better.
Yes.
And I showed that to executives at Disney.
Some see this controversy as a sign that Disney is fearless in exploring new territory. Others think the studio is carelessly alienating its oldest and most loyal fans. Whichever side you land on, it's clear that the Snow White debate goes far beyond one film. It reflects how we, as a culture, decide which stories deserve an update and where we draw the line between modernization and betrayal of tradition. In a world hungry for both progress and nostalgia, Disney stands at a crossroads. Where it goes next could shape not just the fate of Snow White, but the future of fairy tale storytelling itself.